Let's say we want to go into splines. Okay, so we go into splines and we get this. And right away, we can see there's a ton of knee pops. Oops, let's do that. There's a ton of knee pops. The feet are weird and wiggly, and they're popping and snapping. What the heck is going on? Even the body feels a little weird. Well, at this point, it's just a matter of adding breakdowns. So breakdowns are necessary when you're doing stuff like this because there are certain parts of the body where we blocked everything on 3s, which is good, and you can see the body is pretty much in place. But certain things will need more frames, more keys. That's just how animation works. For example, if I had a character just standing here and doing this, I don't need to add a ton of keys on the body because it's doing nothing. But I'm going to need keys probably on every frame of this hand to get all of that motion working in here. The feet need more keys than the body does. So now we're in splines, we can just add the keys where we need them instead of adding them globally all the time, especially on places that don't need the keys. Let's see. Sometimes when I do a walk with translation and then cycle with offset, it crashes after a certain number of frames at the feet. I have to practice seeing the redirect tool. Yeah, so if you're doing a number of steps and then the feet are crashing into each other or something happens, it's really just making sure that the cycle is perfect, that the first and last keys are exactly the same, just moved forward, and everything is moved forward the same amount as well. Otherwise, you're going to get this weird crash or this like disconnect right in there. So that's the very big important thing. So the first thing that I will generally do when I'm starting the splining process is first double check that your curves are working correctly. This is a quick thing, but you need to double check this because your cycles might not actually be cycling correctly. So for example, let's look at the translate Z, I think. No, Z's going to be fine because we put it in linear. Okay, so rotate X. You can see the curve's a little bit wiggly, a little bit not the greatest, but in general, the cycle itself is working. If we look at the infinity, great. That's nice. But look at the translate X. See that? How the beginning of the animation and the end of the animation don't line up correctly, and we get this kind of weird bump in there. The reason that's happening is because of the way Maya works with auto tangents, which is the way it handles the curves. And essentially, the beginning and the end of your curves will always be flat if you're using auto tangents, because that's just the way the math works. And in this case, we want to connect it to the infinity cycle. So imagine we're just trying to connect these lines in a smooth way. We would want to do something more like this. And you see how that smooths out that connection there? That's going to avoid that kind of hitch or bump in your curves and in your cycle. That just makes it look weird. So I'm just going to go through here and quickly go through my curves. We're going to refine this even more later. But for now, I'm just going to make sure that none of the cycles have that issue right there. So there we go. Nice and smooth. Now the feet should be good for the most part, but we can always double check. Okay. And I just realized here, where is it? Okay, that's good. Cool. Yeah, so right here, foot roll. But foot roll is going to be something we're going to look into a little bit more specifically in a little bit, so I'm not going to worry too much about this here. Okay, so with this, we just did a quick look at our curves, and already that's going to smooth out our cycle. You can see the body feels way better just by doing that. We don't have this weird like shake and like sputter at one point. Okay, cool. So what is the next step? Honestly, it depends on the shot. Sometimes I'll work on the body first because usually the body is just some quick fixes. Sometimes I'll work on the feet first because they need more frames. So there's not like a, you have to do it in this order kind of thing. For now, let's work on the feet first because the feet, there's definitely a lot of things wrong with them. Now for this demo, what I'm going to do is I'm actually only going to work on one foot. And I'll show you a quick way of just taking what we have and then mirroring it over. That, like, honestly, we could do it manually both ways, and that's usually what I'll do from a lot of character cycles where a character has a very specific, unique walk cycle. But for something like this, I don't want to spend like twice as much time than I need to polish a foot. So let's just kind of quickly do a pass here on the foot. We'll go to the body, then we'll go back to the foot, polish it up, mirror it over. And the reason why I'm going back and forth is because the changes I do on the foot will affect the body. I'll need to adjust the body. And once I do that, I'll need to go back to the feet and make any small micro adjustments in there. And there's going to be a lot of back and forth, and that's okay. So the big thing with the foot, first thing I need to do is I need to break up the motion here and put more control in there. So for example, when the foot contacts the ground here, right now it's hitting the ground, and my computer switched to French there. There we go. The foot contacts the ground, and then the foot takes 3 frames to touch the ground. That's too long. It's too many frames. When the foot hits the ground, usually you're going to have 1, maybe 2 frames to hit the ground. So we have contact. Next frame here, I'm just going to set a key on this foot, 0 out the foot roll. And I can add a little toe drag right here. Right there. Next frame, toes are zeroed out. Right there. So right there, now we have that stronger contact. Poof, done. Nice and easy. Just 1, 2, 3. Exactly. So we get that nice contact right in there. Now we go through. Again, I'm just going to focus on the one foot that's closest to us here, the right foot. As the foot comes up, we have the foot roll right here. Now the foot roll is something that a lot of people tend to have issues with, specifically that the foot roll is going to go up and over, and usually the arc is going to have something like this, and the spacing is going to ease out, then it'll ease in, pop forward, and then do its own thing. We don't want this, and we don't want to pop. It should just push forward. It's pushing the body weight. It's just going to ease out from the ground here, and then get faster and faster, and that's it. And the arc of the heel should look something like this. It's kind of like a shoe shape right there. So that's the arc of the heel we're looking for. So right now, if I just look at my graph editor, so this goes all the way to the very first assignment. If you think of your first assignment, which is adjusting the spacing, and think of your ease ins and ease outs and fast ins, fast outs, we don't want that heel to ease right here. We want it to just keep going. So, bip, right there. And I can just look at my curve, and I can either adjust my other poses here ever so slightly. So take my contact pose, maybe bring this down a little bit to straighten that leg, or take my down pose and bring this up like that, and I get this nice curve right through here. That just goes slow and then faster, faster, faster right there. I've got the perfect heel arc right through here. But now the foot comes up, and here we have a very unique issue where if you look at the channel box, we have rotations and we have foot roll, because Maya is trying to interpolate between the two of them for us. It's trying to be helpful, but in this case, it's making a mess of things because now we're dealing with counter animation on these two sets of controls. It's not good. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to manually put the foot where I want it. So on frame 17, the foot should be pushing up and the toes starting to roll off the ground. So I'm going to just middle mouse drag from frame 16 to 17 to copy that pose and make sure I copy everything. There we go. And then I'm just going to play with the toe break attribute here The toe brake attribute controls when the toes will roll off the ground. Sometimes it's called foot brake. So for example, right now it's set to, let's put this to 90. It'll be a little more clear. If that foot, the angle of the foot to the toes gets to 90 degrees, that's when the toes comes off the ground. If I set this to 65, when the foot gets to 65 degrees, that's when the toes come off the ground. So on frame 17 here, I'm just going to roll that foot up and then use the toe brake to just give myself that angle that I want right in here. And I can even maybe start to pull it in just a little bit here on the down pose, just to start leading that in. And I'm just putting the heel where I want it to be. I'm not really caring what happens in the graph editor. I'm just putting it where it should be, right there. Maybe I'll put it a little higher as I go. Then from there, frame 18, we're going to do the same thing. So I'm going to middle mouse drag from frame 17, copy it to frame 18. Again, make sure I copy everything. There we go. And just put that foot where it needs to be. So in this case, I'm actually going to zero out the foot roll and just use the rotations. So we're getting there. We're going over here. So let's get that drag. And we're going to be going back and forth with this because we're going to need to get that nice arc through here. I think I'm going to rotate it. Let's see. Let's bring this back a little bit, drag that. So again, your poses are never done. Actually want this to be quite a bit higher here so that we get that nice round arc right through here. And here, I can definitely raise this up quite a bit more. Too much right there. And we go through. Now, if you're having trouble with this and you want a visualization, I can take the heel here and I can just use the editable motion trails to track that arc. And you can see I'm actually pretty close here. Now, with the editable motion trails, what I'll do is usually select the trail and then set it to alternating frames. That way I can also see the spacing, and you can see that there's a big pop right here. So I'm going to just raise this up here. So we avoid that big pop. And then watch those toes. See how the toes are sliding backwards? I do not want that. Toes should never slide backwards right there. And this is where we could have that one frame of drag if we wanted to. Right there, and then kind of snap it back there. So there we go. We get a nice heel motion going up. And voila. Okay. And then we come down to the ground here. Cool. Now, is that done? No. Because we've got other motions that we have to think of, which is the front view. So if we look at the front view here, this is where a lot of people will have an issue. The foot is raising up, but keep in mind, the toes are pointing outwards, which means that when we roll the heel isn't rolling forward, it's rolling outwards. You can see that here. It's rolling out screen left right now. But then, as the foot picks up, it moves screen right because we want to move the foot inwards. And you get this kind of big weird shake in your curve right there. Well, why? How? What the heck is going on? The thing to keep in mind here is that our feet don't push off of the ground evenly. If you're going to curve your foot outwards, if you're going to curve your foot inwards towards the other foot, you're going to push off of that big toe, and your toes aren't going to just roll like this perfectly straight. They're going to roll off and twist, and your big toe is going to be the last thing on the ground. So there's a twisting motion in here. Now, if you're walking the other way and doing this, your pinky toe is going to be the last one to leave the ground as you roll your foot this way, not just perfectly straight. So what this means is as the foot comes up here, especially as the toes start to lift off the ground right there, I can use the ball rock attribute right here on this rig and just roll those toes around slightly. So I'm going to just refine that here a little bit. I think I could ease that a little bit more here. So I'm looking at the graph editor here to see how much I can ease that. Oops, too far. Right there. Let's use a little bit more ball rock here. And you can see how that's pushing off of the big toe now instead of only the straight, boring, flat foot there. Now it's in the air. Now I'm dealing with all my rotations. I don't need that ball rock. I can just rotate this and put it where I need it to be. So I'm going to look at the angle of the foot here, kind of keep that same motion in place there. And there we go. Now we have that arc come up, roll, and push off of the big toe. We're not getting that weird hitch in that foot there. So we get that nice push off right through there. And if I wanted to go even further, I could even use, let's see, ball twist. Nah, I could even add a little extra rotation in there. I'm not going to worry about that too much right now. Now you do see we get a little bit of weirdness in the foot right here. And essentially this is just essentially a little bit of gimbal lock that's happening because we added so many rotations to the foot. If you're getting this, you can see right here, that's the rotations that's kind of throwing us off here. What I can do is I can either zero things out, or honestly, I just place it where I want it to be. So in this case, the foot is going to straighten out here, going to start to flatten out, and we get something like this. And let's see a little bit further forward here. So something like that. And you can see, I just put the foot where I want it to be. Done. There's a lot of times in animation where the easiest solution is not the technical, okay, how do I have to get these curves to work? And how do I get all of this math to work? In the end, it's really what looks good on screen. That's honestly the only thing that's important. So there are many times where all you need to do is put it where you want it to be. And there you go. So I'm looking at the arc of the foot here. Now, as it comes in, one thing I want to change, just because we're talking about all of this, in terms of like refining our foot, is that the foot doesn't land flat on the ground like this, with the toes perfectly flat. It lands on the outside edge of the heel usually. So we do this kind of land, and then flat. That means that on the contact pose, we're actually going to have a little bit of this rotation right here. And really, when you think about it, what's happening, and let's just get rid of our curve here for now. What's happening is that, like I was saying earlier, our ankle wants to line up with the lower leg. So right here, see how the lower leg is at this angle here, but the foot is perfectly straight. We're getting this offset here. All I want to do is use that ball rock to line that up right here. So 4.3, I'm just going to go on my first frame, make sure that matches, because we want to make sure the first and last frames match exactly. And then as the foot comes in, again, we're going to just key this so that we don't have any foot roll and rotations working at the same time. So on frame 24, I'm going to zero out my ball rock. I'm going to zero out my foot roll. There we go. So now we're only using rotations. So the foot comes in, and as it comes in, it's going to ease to the end here. and just roll up a little bit. What I'm trying to do is I'm going to try and straighten the leg early. So see here how that foot is still pretty high there? Lower that down. Let's raise this up just a little bit here. So you see how that knee is starting to straighten out early. Right here. This is going to be huge in getting no knee pops in your walk. See that? How the knee is already straightening? By making sure that the foot comes in low, and we can probably use a little bit more ball roll here. What it's going to do is just make it so that your foot feels more natural. And your leg has no pops in there. Okay. So we get that. So looking at the arc, you can see how that feels much more natural and just has these slight adjustments to it. It's not just it's got this sweep to it. And if you compare it to the other foot, see how the other foot like pushes up very robotically, has that pause, and then when it contacts, it's very flat. Now this one has this nice arc, pushes through, contacts, and we get that nice sweep in the foot right there. I can even push the rotate Z here a little bit so that we build up a little bit more to it. Right in there, and we get the nice swoop in there. Let's look at our translate X. We can probably ease that in just a little bit more here. Okay. So there's our foot for the most part. Now, since we're on the foot, let's actually go on an extra little polish element, which I love to do, which is as the foot contacts, if you look at the very heel right here, look at that point. That's the contact right there. It hits and it stays perfectly in place that whole time. I'm not a fan of that because it tends to look kind of unnatural for the most part. So normally what I'll do is I want a little bit of a slide in there. Now there's a lot of different ways you can do this. Since my contact pose right here is pretty much where I want it to be, what I'll do is I'll just take... Just trying to think of the best way to do this. Yeah, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my contact poses right here, and ever so slightly, I'm going to slide them back. So I'm taking my first and last pose to make sure I don't mess anything up. And I'm just going to slide it back ever so slightly in the graph editor right here. So you see how that foot slides forward just a little bit here. Next, I'm going to have that next key back just a little bit as well right here. So that heel hits the ground, slides forward, and we get a little bit of a scoot forward right here. Just the tiniest bit. This creates the feeling like there's friction in the foot and that the foot isn't just kind of hitting and then just locking and gluing itself into the foot, into the ground there. Not only that, but because the foot's at an angle, we can even push a little bit of the rotate Y, or you could use the ball twist. No, let's use the rotate Y in this case. So as the foot contacts here, it's actually going to be a little bit straighter right here, and then hits the ground and it slightly rotates kind of out like that as it hits. So it creates that feeling of everything hitting and stopping as it scrapes into the ground there. And it's a tiny little bit of polish, but it's going to avoid the feet feeling gluey. There we go. So now if we look at that foot, overall it's working pretty well. I feel like my Translate X is a little sharp right in here. Kind of bounces back a little quickly here. So I'm going to ease that in a little bit more. Round that out right there. Yeah, that's better. There we go. So that's the foot, pretty much polished. Now, does that mean it's final? No, we're going to be coming back to it, but let's get the body in first. So when we're looking at the body, the big thing that we're looking at is really just curve cleanup and understanding what the curves are doing and why we're moving the curves. And it's really just thinking of how to make these curves dynamic. So let's take, for example, our translate X, our side-to-side motion here. If we look at this curve, overall it's feeling pretty good because we really refined this one. So we fixed the beginning and the end. And what I'm looking for here is I don't want any of the curves to feel, for lack of a better term, even. So this is where the third principle comes in. We talked about this a couple of streams ago, but the third principle is thinking of your breakdowns in a way that avoids poses that feel similar in between them. Now you're going to get this a lot less in CG. In CG animation, you're actually it's going to be hard to get this exactly, but by thinking about it in this way, it helps you to emphasize things a little bit more. So what does the third principle mean? It's essentially, instead of breaking things in halves, when you're thinking of your breakdowns and your spacing, you want to break things down in thirds. The reason for this is if we have this shot here and we break it down in half, right there, both of these are the same. There's no ease in, ease out. It's just flat. Now, if we break this in half here again, oh, now there's an ease right there. But these two are the same. It still feels kind of flat and linear right there. If we break it down in half, that's feeling even more like an ease. But right there, these two, still the same. And no matter what, there's always going to be 2 points that feel the same. If you break things down into thirds, though, right here, already, that's different. That feels more unique. We break this into thirds, that still feels unique. This into thirds, that still feels unique. There's no point that feels like they're linear or boring. So by breaking things into thirds, we get a little bit more of a dynamic movement in there. Now, it's a little harder to see here, but for example, let's take a look at this curve right here. So if we look at from here to here, we can definitely see, especially if I add keys just to show this, that there is a nice ease right in there. We are pushing that quite a bit. Again, that's because Maya is using math and making these round curves. It's already kind of doing a little bit of thirds for us. But that doesn't mean that it's doing it well, or that we can't exaggerate things a little bit more. So for example, right here, if I just take this tangent right here and just rotate that a little bit more, I can make a curve that's just a little bit more dynamic. I'm going to take all my curves on the body here and I'm just going to buffer them so we can see what they used to look like. And it's not going to be huge, but again, if I just take this and just slightly push it here, you can see how that makes it just a little more dynamic and curvy, and we get away from that flat, just linear feeling in there. So as I'm looking at my curves, I'm kind of looking for moments like that, as well as just kind of trying to think of how I want that shape to work. Now, am I just doing this randomly and just hoping for the best? No. I'm thinking back to those principles of a flat curve is slow, a steep curve is fast. So I'm trying to think, like, for example, here, how can I make this movement here a little bit more dynamic? I can hold it a little bit more here and then have it move a little faster right there. It's not huge, it's not groundbreaking, but by doing so, I can help to push my curves to be just a little bit more dynamic. Now, when you're starting to do this, always be sure to look at your shot. Make sure you're not breaking anything. But if I look at that side-to-side body right now it just has a little bit more oomph to it. Just a tiny bit. Now, to be fair, that curve was working pretty well. If we were to do that with our rotate X, though, you can see how this is very boring. Like, honestly, I could almost put this into linear mode, and look at that. It's not that different from what I had before. So this is something where we would definitely want to push this, but we'll work up to that. Let's see, translate Y. So the translate Y, this is where we can really push a little bit more of the weight in here. And what you want to think about here is the bouncing ball. The body is a ball. It's bouncing up and down. And when it drops, the only thing stopping it from being a literal bouncing ball is the fact that the knees catch it before it hits the ground. So what that means here is that as it drops, we don't want this very even spacing here. So right here, this, look at that. That spacing here to here is the same as the spacing here to here. It's very even in and out. That's not really a bouncing ball, is it? It's just the same. That's boring. So instead, what I would want to do here is think of the ball dropping and then being caught by someone. And there's that weight and that ease before it hits the ground, because you don't want it to just hit. So what I don't want is this, where it's really fast and slams into the ground. But I also don't want this nice even motion. So I'm just going to add an extra key in here and just move that down just a little bit. So now as the hips come down, there's this kind of fast drop right here. And then it catches itself and we get that nice weight shift in there. So I could do it like that, or I could go the other way. Honestly, like, this is where you as the animator have control. You can choose. So I could put it this way, where now the curve comes through, it holds a little bit more, and then moves faster on the way down here. So I could do that. And this is where you would try it out. See which one you prefer. I think in this case, I'm going to actually go with this right here, because once the hips catch the weight, it's going to take more time for it to push up. Think of it like you have a heavy weight. If you catch it, it's going to come down very quick. If to raise it up again, it's going to take time. It takes energy to raise up that weight. So what I want to do here is I want to really push that ease right here, so the hips come down and take time to build up into the push up right there. So we get that nice ease right through here. Now, as we come through, I can maybe add a little overshoot right there to that peak, just a little bit. Honestly, it's not going to make a huge difference, but we can do that. Comes down. Make sure I'm getting the same down-ish. It doesn't have to be the same perfect. Again, we're not trying to mirror things, but it can help just give a little bit more kind of life to it. More weight. Okay, a little fast there. I'm actually going to take this. I'm going to bring both of these up, honestly, and just ease that a little bit more here. There we go. So now we're getting that nice weight in there. Comes through. But it all comes through looking at your curve and understanding what your curve is supposed to be doing. Translate Z. Hey, done. It's linear. Rotate X. So this is going to be the nod here. Now the nod, this is something that I want to be very conscious of. So the first thing is we can definitely just push the spacing here to be more dynamic. So something like that. But there's a few things that I want to make sure of. First is that I never zero it out. I should never have a key that is on 0, which I don't have, which is good. The next thing I don't want is for the nod, because it is the nose, in this case, for a Bali character. It is the nose, so what I don't want is the character. Imagine they're walking and they're doing this. Up, down, up, down, up. that's going to get very weird because they're supposed to be looking at something. They're supposed to be looking at the horizon. So when our head overlaps, we're looking at the horizon and we do this. We're down below the horizon. Or if we're looking up, we're up above the horizon. If we're doing this, this feels strange. So I'm going to take that rotate X and I'm actually going to favor the curve. So for the most part, it's looking down below the horizon here. So you can see now, the head never goes up above. It is always angled down slightly. Then I'm just going to tone it down here because I actually want it to be subtle. I don't want it to be too much here. They're not listening to heavy music and banging their head around like that. So this is going to give more weight to the character and just make it more dynamic. The other thing I'm feeling is like, see here how the curve on the way down is at the same height as the curve on the way up, right there. And that feels a little weird, or the key, I should say. So I'm going to try to offset this a little bit and just favor the curves. And what this is going to do is just going to create a little bit more of a rhythm in there. Let's see, do I want to do it that way or this way? This is just experimenting, seeing what I feel works better. So, down. Nah, I liked it the other way. Maybe a little too much though. So just pushing my curves, thinking of what do the curves mean? How do I want it to feel? And essentially what I want is as it's coming down, it's the down pose here. That's where the body stops. That's when I want that fast motion here to kick in. So it should hold a little bit more here and then move a little bit faster there. Same thing here. It should hold a little bit more here, move a little bit faster afterwards. So thinking through those curves. Rotate Y. Honestly, it should be pretty close to a pendulum. So I might just exaggerate some of the spacing here to get a little bit more of an ease in, ease out right there. So this is the side-to-side motion in there. I don't want it to be too linear. So we've got that. Rotate Z, that's the side to side. As it comes through here, this is where the weight is pushing through right here. So contact to the down. We want this to be nice and sharp. Now we can probably see it a little bit easier here. You have that contact, but right now it's just kind of easing through. Very nice and gentle. And this creates the feeling that the hips don't really have an impact to them. Essentially, it's taking the leg and going, and you're hitting into the ground there. So what I can do here is I'm just going to add an extra key and just sharpen that motion ever so slightly right there after the impact. So right after the contact. So what this is going to do is just going to give us a little bit of a hit up right there. And just a slight adjustment in that spacing to make it a little bit more dynamic and make that impact and hit feel a little stronger. So there we go. So you can see it's just at this point, because we thought through everything, what we're doing right now is just cleaning up curves and thinking of how we want the animation to feel. We're not rebuilding things. We're not having to fix a bunch of things. To be fair, I could also be fixing some small things in here, but nothing too bad. So with that, that's pretty much the body. Okay, so there's two more things we need to do. First is the knees. And the knees are the painful point. Now, you'll notice I haven't done the blue leg yet. We're going to get to that. But I do want to fix the knees on the red leg first because we're going to be using it to help the other one. So how do I make the knees work better? Well, first, I have to remember that I forgot the knee PVs. See that? How the knee PVs are staying in place? So as the character walks, there's going to be a point where he actually goes past the knee PVs. Is that a bad thing that I forgot it? No, not really. Because they're still facing forward. It's not going to be a big deal. Honestly, at this point, what I can do is just go to frame 25, set a key. Right now they're at they're at 100 units forward. So if we look at our back foot here, that's 100 units forward from that back foot. That back foot here is now at 20. That means that the knee PVs should be at 120. There we go. Take my curve and just set that to linear right there. And then just go to curves and infinity curves. Now, as the character walks forward, done. Knee PVs. Easy. So at this point, I can use the knee PVs to adjust any wiggles in the front camera here. But if you actually look at it here, we actually don't get that many wiggles from the front right there. Why not? Because we made sure that the foot works. The knees, the big thing that causes pops and wiggles is the fact that something in the foot or the body aren't matching up together, and it's creating this pop or snap or wiggle. As long as we get the body and the foot working for the most part, you're going to have very little to do with the knee. So from the front view, hey, we're done. Let's look at the side view now. And again, we're just looking at the red leg here. Okay, so what's a knee pop and a knee wiggle? So a knee pop and knee wiggle is when the spacing suddenly changes for no reason or kind of abruptly. And yes, knees, they can have that dirt. Knee PVs, having a little bit of motion there can be very nice to them. So if I look at this knee here, the thing that I'm looking for is any sudden and abrupt changes to them. So here, for example, the knee almost holds perfectly in place and then moves backwards right here. That creates the slightest bit of a pop right there. So what I would want to do here is have this frame right here, the knee ever so slightly straightening out, just a little bit. Now, since the foot is flat on the ground, I can do this with the body. I'm just going to take my curve here and just straighten that up and just see how that feels. And if I need to, I can just set another key here, bring that body down slightly, and there we go. See how that knee has a slight reversal of the arc now? That avoids that knee pop. Now, as it comes through here, it goes backwards, backwards, boom, forwards. What I need to do here is I can try to stretch the leg a little bit sooner. So this is our up pose right here. Let's go a little bit higher so we get that nice straight leg, but I'll always try to keep a little bit of a bend in there. It just helps avoid issues. Comes up. Through, forward, and there we go. So now that knee is starting to lean forward instead of going backwards and then forwards right there. Okay, comes through, forward, nice and smooth. It has a little bit of a plateau here, but that's not a bad thing. And then as it comes down, this is where you'll usually see a lot of knee pops. Comes through, down, and we get a little bit of a snap here. So it's straightening, and then boom, it goes into a bend right there. That's not necessarily a bad thing because we do want that contact. But if I want to soften it a little bit, I can take my foot roll here, raise it up just to get a little bit tiny more of a bend in there. So we're not going from an absolute straight into a full bend right in there. I can also take this frame and I'm going to lower it down ever so slightly to straighten that knee. so that we ease into this contact pose here a little bit more. So you can see how by sweeping down that foot, we have a lot more control over that knee right through there. I feel like my translate Z of the foot could be pushed a little bit further here. I don't want this straight line here. That would be bad. Right there. So a little bit of angle backwards. Okay, I'm just going through my spacing, making sure it feels good. There we go. So there's that knee. Done. And you can see that it wasn't really that tricky because I made sure that all my mechanics were working correctly. Now, the other knee is a nightmare. It's snapping and popping and wiggling. But at this point, I could... Let me double check here. Something is off in my cycle. Yeah, like see there, the toes, there's a rock in the foot here. So this is a good thing. Let's look at our infinity curves. Yep, something is off. See that? How the curves don't match up? My first and last pose aren't quite the same. Right here and here. Yep, you can see the difference right there. So what I'll do is I'll just middle mouse drag to the end here and just make sure to key everything aside from the translate Z. And that should fix it. And then translate Z should be at 30. Make that perfect cycle. Let's double check the body here. Okay, that's good. There we go. That's better. So something got a little offset, but that's fine. You just have to make sure the first and last keys are the same. So with that, let's actually double check. I want to double check my foot roll here. Just because that spacing got tweaked a little bit. So you'll notice that the curve for the foot roll should have this nice swoop in there. Make sure that didn't mess anything up. Okay, good. So from there, I need to get the other foot to match. So I could just animate it manually. And like I said, if this was a character where they had a very specific kind of limp or I want some organic variation, I'll just do the whole process again. You can see it didn't take all that long. But what if, I just want to work quickly. This is for a video game. No, the camera's going to be way up here. No one's going to notice if the legs are doing the exact same thing. And honestly, I want to save some time as an animator because I don't want to animate everything twice for everything. How can I make that faster? Well, if you're doing base Maya, it's going to be very tricky because you're just going to have to copy and paste and mirror, just like what we did with the body. Putting curves into negatives it's kind of a pain. So you could use Animbot. Animbot has a really cool tool that you just hit a button and it'll mirror all your keys. Done. That's it. You're good. Move on. Nothing more than that. The problem is Animbot costs money. So if you don't have Animbot, what do? Well, there is a free plugin, Studio Library. And Studio Library is basically a pose library. It allows you to save poses into here and reapply them. But it can also save animation. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to take my foot right there. And I don't think I need any of the other keys. It's just the foot. I'm going to take this here and I'm going to right click in Pose Library, Studio Library here. And I'm going to create a new animation right there. I'm just going to call this vanilla R foot. And frame range 1 to 25. Perfect. I'm just going to hit save. And I don't need to save a thumbnail. There we go. I just saved that foot animation into Studio Library. Okay, well, how does that help me? Well, now let's save our shot first. I can take this foot here. I'm going to buffer the curves just so we have a backup of them. Always a good idea. I can take my left foot and I'm just going to delete all the animation on it except for that first key right there. And I'm going to go into Studio Library and I'm just going to take my vanilla R foot animation. I'm going to apply it on my left foot by, and where's the animation here? Connect, namespace, there we go. And the thing that I'm looking for here is mirror table. So what I'm going to do, actually, did I need to save the animation? Actually, I might not have needed to save the animation. I haven't done this in a while, so let's do this instead. I'm going to create a mirror table for this rig. I'm going to select everything. And what you want to do is set your the left side and right side delineator. So that's L underscore in this case. So you have L underscore foot and R underscore. So here, this is actually good. This is fine. And we want to mirror on the YZ plane. So that's X on both sides. So the plane that goes right in between the two. Okay, hit save. And let's call this Bali. Save that. Okay. So, yeah, this is going to be easier. So now I have my Bali mirror right here. All I need to do is take my keys and I want to copy from right to left. Right there. And the range, selected range is fine. Let's hit apply. And make sure I select both feet. There we go. So now, maybe I should do all keys. There we go. Yeah, so make sure all keys is selected. I don't know why my range meter isn't showing. Okay, so again, create a mirror table. You set it to follow the axis you want. In this case, it's the YZ plane. Set it to all keys, which I forgot to do. Switch which sides you want to have swapped, and then just hit apply with both feet selected. And now I have, ta-da! Not really a walk, more of a hop. So if I look at this here, kind of weird. That's not really what I need. But the thing is, keep in mind that this foot is just a cycle. So what I can do is just take this entire foot animation and I'm going to just drag it so that it starts 12 frames later. So on frame 13, that's where we actually start the animation. Make sure I grab everything just in case. So frame 13, that's where we start. And now we have this. Oh, still not quite a walk, is it? Well, take a look at your Translate Z. You just need to make sure that it starts at the same point that it used to. So, for example, here, I would just need to raise this up so that the previous curve lines up right here, like that. So this is why the buffer curve was useful. I can line that up and actually make sure I line it up correctly here. So this should be right around here. Yeah, so right there. So we have that. And I'm just going to go to the contact frame, make sure that that is feeling right there. A little lower. There we go. Done. So now I've got both feet nice and polished and ready to go. And it actually looks like it missed one of the mirroring. So you see here how the foot is twisting out this way. The reason for that is the ball rock. The animation, it didn't, or the tool didn't know to mirror that attribute because it's not a default attribute on the rig. That's going to happen. Regardless of which tools you use, you might have things that happen like this. In that case, I can just take my curve here and I'm just going to scale it and flip it. I'm going to take the curve, scale by a value of -1. There we go. Done. So that's going to happen regardless of which tools you have. It can kind of be a pain, but as long as you watch out for those aren't a problem. And now we have this nice polished walk right in there. All good. There we go. So with that, there's one last thing we can do, which is add a little bit of squash and stretch on the body. And the easiest way to do this, honestly, is to take your translate Y. I'm just going to copy that and I'm going to paste it on my squash and stretch attribute here. So paste that right there. And then I essentially want it to stretch when the body is falling. So I'm going to scale this curve. I'm going to invert it. So as the body falls, it stretches and then squashes. Actually, do I want to invert it or just offset it? Let me think. Yeah, just like that. So I just offset it. It's going to be a little easier. There we go. So now we get that nice squash and stretch right through there. It's a little much. You usually want to just feel it more than you see it. I'm going to tone this down a lot. And there we go. Now we have that nice squashy, stretchy feeling, but it's very slight. And there we go. So that's a vanilla walk. And the big thing through all of this, I know like I keep repeating a lot of this, but the thing that's going to really help you with vanilla walks and any type of walk is honestly just taking time to understand what it is we're looking at. And I'm noticing a knee pop here. This is because I copied the foot, but the body isn't copied. So right here, oh, see that? No problem. I just need to adjust either my rotation, Z, maybe tone that down a little bit, or maybe take my translate Y. Just adjust that. So right there, snap. I need to, what's the best way to do this? There's a lot of different ways, and I'm trying to think of which one is going to affect my animation the least. So it's just going through your attributes and kind of playing around with them. That's really honestly it. I think a little bit of translate Y, maybe not having it go quite so high. And actually playing with the foot roll. Let's do that first. Comes up, snaps up a little fast here, straightens out there. So I'm just going to bend this a little bit, not that much. And then take this key here and just bring it down. There we go. Now it's bending a little too fast here. Yeah, there's a little bit of a pop right there. So let's take a look at the body. There we go. That's better. So you can see it's just a matter of tweaking your curves and really understanding what it is you're looking at and how can we use that to make our animations a little bit stronger. Now, I am noticing this is something that it's not necessary, but see here how the knee is kind of pointing in the opposite direction of the foot? Usually the knee points in the same direction as the toes. So I can just add a little bit of a pull right here. Just line that up. And there we go. I'm getting really nitpicky now. So there we go. So now that knee from the front view is nice and clean. I could do the same thing with the other foot. But ta-da! And yes, there are scripts to match the cycles and tangents, which are very, very nice, especially when you're working on a full character. That can be so nice instead of having to go through each curve and manually adjusting. As a student, the most your rigs are going to have are not that many curves to watch out for, so it's not something to worry about too much. But especially like when you're dealing with a dragon with tons of wing membrane controls and tail controls and spine controls and all of these things, having a script where you can just go click, done, and then that way if ever you make a change, you can just click again, make sure that it all kind of matches up. So nice, so very nice. And Animbot has that built in, I believe, which is also very nice. So with that, that is really the majority of it. So I hope all of that made sense. I hope it was clear how I was trying to think through things, how I was applying the bouncing ball, the pendulum assignment, the tail overlap. I was applying the spacing assignment. Everything that we did up to this point was all applied in here to create that final piece, as well as understanding the core mechanics. If you understand what is happening and why it's happening, it makes it so that your choices are actual choices and not guesses. And it doesn't mean that we have to stick to the one thing that is supposed to happen in real life. We can choose to do all sorts of different things. We can make it more exaggerated, less exaggerated. It's up to us as the animator. But they are choices and not just random guesses.